Less than 48 hours before the general elections in Honduras, thousands of voters could be left without the possibility of casting their ballots as they haven't received their identification documents. Elections were held this Friday in 8 states of Venezuela for indigenous representatives. India's farmers marked 1 year of protests this Friday and remained steadfast despite Prime Minister Narendra Modi's announcement that the 3 controversial agricultural laws that sparked their mobilisations will be repealed. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. Three days shy of the general elections in Honduras, thousands of people could be left without the right to vote as the National Registry has not delivered their new identification cards. Our correspondent Hilda Silvestrucci brings us more details.
At the National Pedagogical University, where identity cards are handed out, hundreds of people are waiting to receive their documents. Although they registered more than a year ago, they still do not have their identifications. When I went to see the person who was giving them, they said that there was a wrong number. It was a year old. Well, the letters of the certificate that they give you were erased. The paper was in blank. More than 5 million people registered for the census, but even though the registration was on time, every time they go to the National Registry unit, they are told to come back another day. It was not ready. It did not appear in the system, but I was patient. I went and came back and went again. Days before the polls open, there is no response from the authorities in charge of the identification process, while voters are beginning to get used to the idea that they will not go to the polls. I have been going to all the places to Ciudad España, to Amarateca. They only make you happy. Here I have come 3 times, and the 3 times it's never there. It is a part of the mishandling of the National Registry before I went to the registry, and they took my identity card and now they don't. And now, who is going to pay for that ticket? Some opposition candidates suggest that this is a fraud strategy, given that 100,000 people from the opposition could be left out of the electoral process.
Here there will be at least 500,000 people left without voting because the process has been unsuccessful. Many people came many times and did not find their identity card and did not return, and there are a lot of identity cards that are not being delivered because people got tired of coming. So watch out, because here a fraud may be starting since some are being given their IDs and others are not.
The new census was part of the agreements between parties to counteract electoral fraud, as there were many deceased who appear as active voters, but now thousands will not be able to participate due to the delay in the process.
Hilda Silvestrucci, teleSUR, Honduras.
Haitians living and working in the Dominican Republic are facing the possibility of arrest and deportation, even in the case of pregnant women. Our collaborator Danny Shaw brings us more details.
We're in Haiti, Chiquito, in the Dominican capital of Santo Domingo. We've tried to talk to different Haitian workers about the ongoing and increasingly difficult situation with Dominican migration. They've said that morning, afternoon, night, it doesn't matter what time, Dominican authorities are sweeping through, picking up Haitians. They've targeted pregnant Haitian women. They've targeted Haitian women who have recently given birth to be taken to La Vacacional de Jaina, which is one of the immigration jails here in DR, before they're deported. Many times there's a lot of human rights abuses. Haitians have talked to me in Creole for the past few days, but they're also afraid of being on camera for obvious reasons. It's sad that they can't articulate in their own words their experience. So this is where many Haitian laborers come to sell their produce, to survive. This is the center of the Haitian migrant community. The human rights abuses that aren't just from the past few days, but years and decades in the Dominican Republic. If a Haitian woman is sexually abused, she doesn't have the right to go to any authority to complain, especially if it's a Dominican assailant who's hurt her. The Dominican authorities can come, they can steal these flowers, they can steal the sugar cane, whatever they're selling, and what can the Haitian people do. So the Haitian community here in IT Chiquito wants to get the word out, though they themselves don't feel capable of coming on camera.
A center dedicated to the study of the thought of the leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, was opened on Thursday, the 5th anniversary of his death. Our correspondent Fabio Lopez brings us the details.
The Fidel Castro Center is a gift to Cuba. This place is the testimony of his life and work. It tells the story of Fidel, which is the story of this island in recent times. Here nothing is casual. Everything has an intention. Every space is symbolic. Every element is iconic. The forest surrounding his life in Virán, the trees of the Sierra Maestra, the stones of the river La Plata in El Salto de Agua, the national tree of Venezuela, the protein plants that he researched in the last day of his existence.
Those who come here are going to learn, let's say, not the boring speech of the blockade, not the speech of those who sometimes think that the Cuban Revolution is a jibber-jabber, but how to reinvent a national project, how to reinvent that Cuban Revolution, that constant perfectibility that Fidel sought. As Silvio said, I don't know if he believes that heaven is on earth, but what he does believe is that he has to fight constantly for it.
Nothing is missing in this complex. A temporary exhibition hall, an amphitheater, a printing press, a publishing house, a research center, an audiovisual group, a multipurpose hall that includes a cinema for 3D projections, an interactive games area with 40 virtual visits, virtual and traditional libraries, and 9 exhibition halls that attempt to bring together the immense work and legacy with the most up-to-date technological support.
I think that here at the end you can feel that mystique of Fidel. I think that he even had to do with the design, his conception. I think he had to do with that too, even with the colors that have been used for this space, the way it has been organized, the information, all the places, all the spaces. I think that wherever you go, from the moment you walk through the gardens, you start to imagine Fidel as if he was here.
In the room called Fidel en el Tiempo, through interactive screen, the visitor will be able to go through his 90 years of life. As a guerrilla fighter, it portrays Fidel as that strategist and tactician, his third degree of commander, the legendary cap, the rifle that accompanied him great out of his life. The gallery Fidel es un país goes through the history of the Cuba he received and the country he bequeathed. Here, the always simple clothes from the last stage of his life when he was following up his agroecological project.
In the center you feel his presence. There is a particular energy that has been achieved through his belongings, that if you look closely, they aren't too many, because he didn't need too many things in his life. He always wore olive green, and that Jesuit tradition that accompanied him since he was very young. He needed neither no excesses or luxury to live.
The Sala Cuba reflects the architectural values of this heritage mansion without the intervention of museography. Here, the visitor can see his condecorations, the gifts he received as head of state and then donated to museums in the country, and the gift from Xi Jinping when he visited Cuba. No exhibit is shown outdoors to avoid tribute as he wished. In the Solidarity Gallery, the technological resources are optimized. The aid given and received by Cuba is collected, as well as Fidel's visit to different places in the world.
I think he would be very proud, he would be very happy, and not because they are talking about his history, but because they are talking about the Cuban. We have done a bit thinking about what he would not like to see here. This is not a place to worship him. This is not an indoctrination center.
I think that what he would most like this place to be is a kind of, let's say, mosque or a church of resistance. This center has that purpose, right? To keep Fidel alive and fighting together with us in the new circumstances.
Of course, the speakers could not be absent from this journey into an immense life. Here are some of his memorable speeches. But it is in the room Fidel is Fidel where emotions overflow.
Para mí Fidel es el hombre más grande de este siglo, compadre. Fabiola López, teleSUR, La Habana.
And we'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Elections were held this Friday in 8 states of Venezuela, where voters will elect their indigenous representatives to the regional and municipal parliaments. Voters exercised their right to vote in 74 polling stations set up by the National Electoral Council across the 8 states. Minister of Indigenous Peoples Rosile Gonzalez explained that 69 councillors and 8 legislators will be elected in the states of Amazonas and Suacatocari, Apure, Bolivar, Delta, Amacuro, Monagas, Sucre and Zulia, where the indigenous populations of the country are concentrated. She also informed that observers from the Council of Electoral Specialists of Latin America would be present throughout the process.
For the first time in history, the indigenous people hold their elections for delegates, and here we are to exercise our right to vote as participants of the indigenous peoples. Here we are as indigenous delegates who were elected by the communities. Here we are representing our colleagues who today are going to be elected as indigenous councillors. And who better than us as Guayú, as Añún? We will be exercising the right that we have in the Guajira, our indigenous councillors. Here we are representing ourselves as indigenous women, as Guayú. We are exercising our right and voting for an indigenous council. Today we will be victorious.
In Peru, a motion filed by opposition lawmakers to impeach President Pedro Castillo will be analysed by Congress on December 7th. The motion requires 52 votes to be admitted for discussion in Congress, almost double the number of signatures collected to present the motion. If the impeachment motion is approved for further debate, the constitutional procedure establishes that the president must appear before Parliament and present his defence, either in person or with the option of having a lawyer present his case. This is the second attempt by Conservative forces to impeach Castillo, the last of which failed to secure enough votes in Congress. And thousands of Peruvians marched through the streets of the capital, Lima, to the Legislative Palace to express their rejection of the latest attempt by right-wing lawmakers to unseat President Pedro Castillo. Members of the ruling Free Peru Party and members of social movements had planned to march to demand a constituent assembly for the redrafting of the country's constitution, but the objective of their mobilization changed in the face of the latest impeachment attempt. Meanwhile, President Castillo called for dialogue between different political sectors and urged to approve the national budget for 2022.
We are rejecting this vacancy request. Let President Pedro Castillo work. Why don't they say they are working for the people? We can only see them attacking, and until now they are not creating or producing a single law to favor the people.
Let's just stop the useless confrontation that hurts the country so much. Let's stop this confrontation that hurts so much our teachers, children. What are we waiting for to children attending schools with their peers and teachers?
In Bolivia, the March for the Homeland continues on its way to La Paz in support of President Luis Arce and against destabilization attempts by the far-right opposition. The march is strengthened with new delegations of workers who joined from Beni Department and the town of Quillacollo. The marchers have advanced over 95 kilometers in 3 days with the aim of completing the almost 200 kilometers to the capital as a way to show their support for the president, the ruling movement towards socialism and the country's democracy, threatened by far-right sectors seeking to conduct another coup. And as well as the trade unions and social leaders who joined the march, the Bolivian people are also participating in large numbers to show their support for the government of Luis Arce. Small farmers, rural workers, indigenous peoples and others have provided food and beverages for these social movements that are marching towards La Paz to defend democracy. In some towns, local priests blessed the marchers. People also performed indigenous ritual dances as a way to support those making the journey. Former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva continues to lead the polls ahead of the 2022 presidential elections, despite having not officially confirmed his candidacy. According to a poll published on Wednesday by the consulting firm Muda Mais Futura, the leader of the Brazilian Workers' Party continues to lead the voter preferences with 38.6%. The poll also showed that voter preference for the Workers' Party increased from 42.5% last October to 43.7% in November. Meanwhile, current President Jair Bolsonaro trails behind with 32.4% of voter intention. Lula recently toured Europe, where he received a warm welcome from political movements and even the Spanish Prime Minister and French President. He has said he will confirm whether he's going to run in 2022 at the beginning of the new year. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. India's farmers are marking 1 year of their protests and remain steadfast despite Prime Minister Narendra Modi's announcement that the 3 controversial agricultural laws that sparked their mobilisation will be repealed. Tens of thousands of farmers came out to demonstrate across India this Friday to mark a year of their protest against government reforms in the sector. In a surprise reversal ahead of elections in key states, Prime Minister Modi announced last Friday that the laws would be repealed when India's parliament meets later this month. After a year of continuous protests, farmers' unions welcomed the move but decided not to end their protest completely until the laws are formally repealed.
We will stop the occupation of this highway as soon as the farm laws are officially repealed during the parliament session. After that, under our farmer union leaders' guidance, we will go back to our homes. We also face issues being here on the streets. We also want to go back. As long as the minimum price safety is not introduced by the government, we are staying here. We are moving only once MSP is implemented. Otherwise, we are not going.
In order to win the larger fight, we not only have to fight against the current government, but also need to understand that every farmer, every class of farmer has to be taken under consideration when we are going to talk about the well-being of farmers, and until the interests of all the classes of farmers are met, we will not be able to achieve the real victory, or victory in a real sense.
Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister has stressed that negotiations on the nuclear deal will fail if Western countries do not withdraw unilateral coercive measures. Ali Bagheri Kani, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister for Political Affairs, assured on Thursday that any progress in the talks set to resume in Vienna must result in the elimination of sanctions against the country and guarantee that a future United States government will not breach the nuclear agreement again. He also denounced that the government of Joe Biden is repeating the mistakes of his predecessor and continuing with the failed policy of maximum pressure against Tehran. In addition, he called on European countries to compensate for their non-compliance with the nuclear deal by implementing practical steps to remove sanctions and obstacles to Iran's development. A World Health Organization spokesman noted it will take several weeks to understand the heavily mutated new strain of the coronavirus that emerged in southern Africa.
For us to understand what impact this variant has. Researchers are working to understand more about the mutations and what they potentially mean for how transmissible or virulent this variant is, and how they may impact our diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines.
And the WHO spokesperson also said the organisation cautions against imposing new travel restrictions due to the emergence of the new COVID-19 variant.
It recommends that countries continue to apply a risk-based and a scientific approach when implementing travel measures, in accordance with the temporary recommendations of the 9th Emergency Committee. And it is important to note that every travel measure should be always weighed, and that countries can do a lot already in terms of surveillance and sequencing, and work together with affected countries or globally to work scientifically to fight this variant and to understand more about it, so that we know how to go about. So at this point, again, implementing travel measures is being cautioned against and taking a risk-based and a scientific approach.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.